Hello everyone and welcome to the March 2021 Talking Team webinar. My name is Neelu Parvinashani and I'm helping with facilitating of today's webinar. So let me start off by just thanking Federal Highway Administration and Paul and Jim for putting together this great Talking Team webinar series. I just wanted to take a few seconds to share with you a few housekeeping items. We at the National Operations Center of Excellence, or NOCO, offer resources for the TSMO community. So what you can see on your screen right now includes on the right side a NOCO useful links box. So feel free to check that out. And also a few resources regarding this webinar. So the web links for Talking Team is also shared there, and also a PDF of today's presentation. You can access this screen right now at the intro, and then at the end we'll come back here again for the Q&A. Other logistical items I wanted to share is that we are recording this webinar, and the recording and the PDF of the slides will be shared on the on-demand learning section of NOCO website. The attendee forms are on listen-only mode by default, but please stay engaged just like you are doing right now by using the question discussion pod for any comments and questions during the webinar. If you type your questions as they come to your mind during the presentation, we are monitoring that, and at the end we have dedicated some time for Q&A, and the moderator will read your questions and pose it to the panel. That's all I had with the logistics, and with that I'll hand it over to our moderator, Paul Jordan. Paul.
Thanks, Neelu, and by way of full disclosure, Neelu does more than just help with this webinar. She's the brains behind the outfit, and we really appreciate you for that, Neelu, for herding cats and doing all that you do for us and for the Center of Excellence. So without Neelu, we'd be in deep trouble. So thank you for that. Very excited about today's Talking Tim webinar, as usual. I do always get a warm and fuzzy feeling when I see everyone typing in from literally every corner of this country, saying hello to each other. Tim Nation, as you might call it. It's great to see that so many good friends and so many new friends chiming in and participating today. So with that, I will move on to review our agenda today. So didn't make it on this slide, but Joey Sagal from the CHAT program in Maryland, actually, CHAT program in Maryland, is going to be doing our executive leadership group segment representing AASHTO. I'll talk about Joey in a minute, but and then Tony Carr and Matt Neemann are going to talk about Nebraska's Tow temporary traffic control program that they have, where they use towers to assist with temporary traffic control, which we know is important in different parts of the country where it might be a struggle. Captain John Stevenson is going to talk to us about the fire truck attenuator for traffic control. So they basically put an attenuator on the back of a fire truck, which we know that fire trucks are often our most important blocking item, a piece of equipment out there, and thus get whacked all the time. So that's a creative way of doing things, and we thought it was had merit to share that with you. So and last but certainly not least is my old and good friend Neil Bedreau from Massachusetts. Is going to talk to us about legislation. I think sometimes we forget about the driver removal and authority removal laws that he just, well, in one case, got it added to the new laws, and in another he got it updated. So I thought that was a good story to tell, as well as giving an update on the Massachusetts TIM program, which you guys all know was a part of for years. So next month we are going to do basically a focus on Next Generation TIM, the Everyday Counts initiative that we've talked about, with the aspect of local TIM programs. And we're going to hear from some local TIM programs from the three locations: Wisconsin, the City of Seattle, and North Texas Council of Government, which is no longer tentative. It is confirmed with Camille Fountain, who participates with us at the national level, as well as being with the Council of Governments down there. So we'll hear from her. I'm excited about that. And then we'll hear from the Executive Leadership Group, Meet the Executive Leadership segment, International Association of Chiefs of Police, and Chief Danny Sharp from Oro Valley Police Department. He's recently retired, but he is still their representative to the ELG from IACP. So that is next month. Wanted to share with you some feedback that you all gave us last month, and very pleased to hear that 86% is very likely to recommend talking TIM. So that means we are doing an okay job at least. So if you could do that, please recommend the Talking TIM to others. And also, if people can't make it, keep in mind that we do record. The recordings are usually available a week or two after the webinar. So please feel free to share it, and we encourage you to share the information. We're trying to get the numbers up, and we do love the participation from all. 93% found the information very useful. Thank you. We would like to be useful, so we do try to do that. We got some suggestions. Some of the suggestions were that you'd like to hear about new technology used by agencies, and we'll be trying to do that. Strategies for funding and making the business case. So that's a good one. We'll come up with a segment on that into the future. And then there was multiple other great ideas: interoperability, performance measures, engaging local agencies, quick clearance strategies, TIM coalition development, which is one that's near and dear to my heart in particular, towing contract strategies, and move over enforcement. And then we got 11 volunteers for future webinars. So we are excited about the feedback, and we will be taking that under advisement in upcoming Talking TIM webinars. So with that, I will stop talking and pass the baton on to my partner in crime, Mr. Jim Ostrich, who will give us some other federal highway updates. Jim?
Thanks, Paul, and thank you, everyone, for joining, for sure. I'd like to preface, or say here in advance that I got to thinking that, and you guys already do this, many of you, but in the chat pod during these webinars, and certainly today, starting today, if you could enter into the chat pod things like what your involvement is, very short, obviously, but being that this webinar is being recorded, it may help us understand better. Like, for example, if you're aware for sure that your state is increasing the use of the online web-based training, TIM training, whether it's from NHI or our partners over at Emergency Responder Safety Institute, whether or not you're doing or using the practice that we're going to hear from a little bit later about mounting TMAs, truck-mounted attenuators, on fire and other apparatus, just about anything that you think would be valuable, helpful for us to understand, because we're not getting, we don't think, the clear picture. Another one that comes to mind real quick is the one regarding, your agencies, police, fire, rescue, any one of the responder agencies, the problem that is vehicles being struck, and thankfully, let's say, the trooper, the police officer, you know, what have you, not being killed, but the vehicle itself just being struck and damaged and taken out of service. That's a big deal, and you guys have heard we're involved in the research for move over and secondary crashes responders struck by. So it'd be great to hear from you if you're aware that, and if you even know a number of how many in your agency were struck last year, anything like that would be helpful. So I just wanted to say that in advance. Very briefly here, you can see we surpassed the 518,000 responders trained. As I mentioned before, the web-based training, you can see it there. The total is just under 100,000 and growing. So thank you for all what you're doing in terms of the training nationally. We've still got a long way to go to get that million mark, but I know and trust in all of you that we're going to get there one day. So the fatalities thus far, struck by fatalities, sad but true. Here we are, March 24th, and there's been 7 law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty and 3 towers. And always underscore, you know, this is one of the main reasons that we do what we do, and let's just always remember that. It's a serious problem. Here's a brief snapshot, if you will, the numbers broken down by discipline. I'd like to pause this for a minute for you guys to digest this to see, I mean, how far really we still have to go. And the good news is we're going to be offering some, we mentioned in previous webinars that we're going to be sponsoring up to 4 national TIM Train the Trainer workshops. And we already have those being lined up starting in early May. And we have some of our great colleagues and professionals that are on here today with us that have volunteered to conduct those train the trainers virtually. We're going to be using the Teams, MS Teams platform. Here's the national map showing those, as I always do, those trained in parentheses, web-based trained in parentheses, and then the total above in person. Here's the actual trained by state. You guys ever have any questions on this and how we can help? I know we're engaging you guys a lot now and into the next couple of years with EDC 6, as Paul said. But our national team is here to help, and not just on the training front, technology and data and so on and so forth. So exciting times, and just be ready to engage. Here's the national map with the percentages of every state, and with the total of responders to be trained. For those of you that have never seen this, there may be a few on here, but as Paul said, most of you are part of our national TIM community, or TIM Nation, as Paul says. Please type in the chat pod questions, don't forget. And then just a reminder, November, there's a lot of planning coming up. A little bit different approach, a more intense approach with all the associations and the states to participate more deeply with the National Traffic Incident Response Awareness Week. And by the way, we've discussed possibly shortening the title for purposes of social media. From what I understand, hashtags and long. NTIRAW, or spelling it out, is a recent meeting that we had with Federal Highway Public Affairs. The suggestion was made. So it might, it's likely to be shortened, so stay tuned for that. And last but not least, here's our team, and it's an honor to work with you guys, and stay safe, guys, and thank you for all you do. Back to you, Paul.
Thank you, Jim. I will just answer one question right now that Ron Whitaker had. He says, how do you get more info on the 4 national train-the-trainer workshops? Stand by. We're going to be, Ron, we'll be making that formal announcement soon, right, Jim? How did we leave that?
That's correct.
Yeah, we'll be sharing that information very soon. We just need to get a few more things clarified, and then we'll be making the announcement. And we're going to, just so that you know, we're going to be a little bit picky on who is allowed to attend those. We want to make sure that we're, getting people that are actually going to train, because we've had that those issues in the past. So, but more to come on that, and we'll certainly be updating this group as well as in the announcement as what that entails. So, with that, I'm very excited to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Joey Sagal, who happens to be a good friend of both Jim and I from many years. Is actually worked with us here at Federal Highway for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. But Joey is special in a lot of ways. One is he's the only man I ever see who could truly do 2 things at once. He could, but really, he's one of the folks who has truly risen through the ranks, from boots on the ground all the way to the point now where, I don't know, he's got some fancy title, Joey. You got some fancy title. I encourage everyone to read the bios, but yeah, Joey's the Deputy Administrator, Chief Engineer for Operations at the Maryland Department of Transportation. So, but he was literally boots on the ground. He's always been a good friend of Tim. He's always been a champion for Tim throughout the years, and a good friend of Jim and I. Always know we can call on him, and just thrilled that he continues to participate with us on the executive leadership group, and he's been asked to provide an update on AASHTO's participation, representing AASHTO today. So with that, Joey, I'll stop talking, and you can take it over and give us some information about AASHTO and their participation in the ELG.
Great. Thanks, Paul. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that warm welcome, and I appreciate being able to represent the ELG. I'm here on behalf of Director Scott Marler, Iowa DOT Director, who chairs the AASHTO CTSO, Committee of Transportation Systems Operations Committee. Really, he and I really serve on the ELG representing AASHTO, the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials, representing the state DOT aspect on the executive leadership group, so that the state DOT voice is heard and we're able to participate with the other fire, law enforcement, DOT, towing recovery professionals, public works professionals. And when Federal Highway and you guys are getting us together and we're talking about traffic incident management. We're fortunate that we also have Pat Zielinski from AASHTO staff that represents, and that with me in my busy role and Scott in his new role, Marler, we also have another Scott Yinger from Maryland DOT serves as my proxy. And we participate in ELG so that we can continue championing traffic incident management. I want to talk about the slide that you see up in front of you here today. The slide shows the AASHTO committee structure, and the traffic incident management falls under the purview of the circled Committee of Transportation Systems Operations, which is circled in red. The CTSO is part of our committees on program delivery and operations, and there's really no hierarchy within this cluster. All committees in this grouping, including CTSO, report directly to the Strategic Management Committee, which oversees all AASHTO committees. So this was part of a restructure we did a few years ago, if anyone was familiar with AASHTO and our committee structure through the years. And deeper down, it used to be STISMO, which is now CTSO. And I mentioned Scott Marler is our chair, and Russ Buckholtz and Tony Prattville are our vice chairs. And then you see our subcommittee chairs across there in the blue. And I'm actually my full-time gig with AASHTO as a committee co-chair, is with Steve Cook for the Community of Road Weather Management, Community of Practice. But traffic incident management is still very near and dear to me, and certainly why I still continue to stay involved and help represent the passionate men and women that are working to advance the state of the practice in traffic incident management. And you can see here on this slide, what's circled in red are the co-chairs for the working group on operations implementation circled. That supports specific TSMO strategies in this field. Now, the current focus is on work zones, planning, management, operations, and technologies. We used to, before we went through a reorganization, had traffic incident management for many years as a committee. Tim Lane from the Arizona Department of Transportation and I chaired that committee. But when we went through a reorganization, even though work zones is the current focus, I want to reiterate that traffic incident management remains a critical function of operations implementation within this committee. Circled is that we still continue to focus on that as a very important function. Is that Tim Lane and I were starting to realize that we were getting diversified into other areas. We were starting to get pulled in some other directions, and that we needed to still participate in ELG, and ELG still has a very important function, and that's why we're still very heavily involved with it. I want to give a very practitioner-based function of what ELG helps me day to day with when I run into a problem or I run into a situation with. When I'm teaching, when I'm having a conversation with a responder group, or when we're having a after action discussion, one thing to remember about the ELG is that when you have from local IACP, from the National Sheriff's Association, from fire on both the volunteer and the career side, from DOT, Public Works, the towing recovery professionals, when the National Association of EMS of professionals, every possible responder that you can imagine that responds to an incident scene, we have executive leadership and buy-in from the highest levels. So whether I'm having that conversation or teaching at the Operations Academy each year, I'm giving practitioners the ability to say, hey, your executive highest level has bought in, and they've said that traffic incident management is key and it's important and it has a role. The same with AASHTO. And when we have the conversations with DOTs, when we're talking about traffic incident management and what Paul loves so much, performance measures, incident lane clearance times, incident durations, numbers of struck-bys and reduction of secondary accidents, when we start talking about those facts and figures, we can start talking about the AASHTO involvement at the ELG and the DOTs and what we're looking at getting out of our return on investment with our involvement. So, Paul, I think I've said enough. I just can't reiterate how important it is, and I appreciate you taking some time to highlight AASHTO's involvement at the ELG. And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank you and Jim, and I know Joe's new, I don't know him very well, but Mark Curley as well, and my former colleague Jeff King for all that you've done in getting the ELG up and going and continuing all these years.
Well, thank you, Joey. We do appreciate that, but we really appreciate your partnership over the years, and are encouraged to know that you're still in it with us, even though you really moved up in the ranks there. So I appreciate that. So thank you for participating today. I know you're a busy man, and I guess we'll be in touch. So for our next speakers, Matt Neemann and Tony Carr. Matt Neemann is from the Nebraska DOT, and Tony Carr is a consultant. He's sort of an unusual consultant in that his background and history is actually in the towing industry. So he has a unique perspective that he brings to the table, supporting the Nebraska TIM program, which is more extensive than I thought until I visited with them a few years ago. And heard a lot of new aspects. One of the things I heard when I visited with them, and I've known about it for a little while and been wanting to share it on one of the Talking Tim webinars, is their temporary traffic control program where they engage the towers. So with that, Matt, you going for us, or is Tony?
I'll get started, Paul.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you all for having me on. Like Paul said, my background, for those of you who don't know me, I see a lot of names on the list today of folks that I've worked with over my career and ran into at different TIM functions. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Tony Carr. I spent 14 years with AASHTO Towing. We were a large 50-truck fleet in the Omaha metro area. For a little perspective, back in 2016, AASHTO Towing ran somewhere between 40 and 50,000 calls for service. So we were a pretty busy tow company. I got involved in TIM back in 2014 at the first Train the Trainer in Nebraska, and there was a metro area TIM group that was kicked off in 2014 also. Since then, I became a trainer in 2014, a master instructor in 2017, and still spend some time TIM training out and about. Over my course of effort there as operations manager at AASHTO, got into a few different things. We spent some time in heavy rescue and got involved in some very cool jobs over my career, and actually got my traffic control technician certification, and we kicked off our own traffic control program within AASHTO Towing. So a little bit of background on how we came to where we are here with the Nebraska DOT program. And before I go too much further, I'll let Matt introduce himself and then tell you a little bit about what we've done over the last year and a half.
This is Matt Neemann. I am a traffic control engineer in our traffic engineering division here at NDOT. So my responsibilities on a day-to-day basis are permanent signing, pavement markings, traffic signals, and also works on traffic control, which leads us really well into incident management. A lot of the same principles, as you know, work from one side to the other. My background, I've been here at NDOT in various roles for almost the last 26 years. And been in our traffic engineering division for right about 15 years now. So I have worked not primarily, but off and on with our incident management groups. With my time here in the traffic engineering division, and worked with Tony and his people at HDR on the development of this towing guidebook. So.
Thanks, Matt. And yeah, and I guess I didn't say it. Since 2018, I came to work at HDR and have been working full-time in TIM since I came over here. So a little bit about what Nebraska is doing in TIM. There's a current statewide TIM program that they kicked off last year. There's been some TIM meeting groups going on the Omaha metro area since 2014. I mentioned that's kind of really where I got involved with TIM, and I think I met Matt and a lot of other local folks in Nebraska DOT and Iowa DOT as well there. In 2017, NDOT kicked off TIM groups in the west central area there. You'll see on your screen that consists of those three counties and then another group in the southeast area there around Lincoln. So We've worked on those since 2017, and then the last year they kicked off this entire statewide TIM program to cover the interstate corridor from one end to the other. And we successfully kicked off 3 new TIM groups in the midst of a pandemic, so that definitely added some challenges into things. With those groups, we do manage a database of responders of somewhere around 900 folks now that we communicate with regularly between NDOT and our TIM team working on that statewide. We've really made an effort to engage all disciplines, emergency communications, emergency management, along with the rest of our responders and get those going. So actually, the reason this program kind of got started was out of our West Central group. There was a clear need for those of you that haven't traveled through rural Nebraska. It gets sparse as you get further west, and along with that go the the area of service that our responders have to cover. So numbers of law enforcement, number of DOT staff can be strained at times when you're dealing with a large incident, whether it be heavy truck crashes or multiple vehicle crashes or weather. Due to that, we know that good TIM says that the more traffic control we can use, the better off folks behave, the safer we are, and the better traffic is managed. And with long-term closures for truck crashes, it seems like the trucks go off the road in western Nebraska and blow to pieces, and there's lots of cargo cleanup and a significant amount of time that it takes to clean these up. And after the emergency is passed, we're with MUTCD requirements to have traffic control and properly move those folks traveling through an incident. The better off we are, the safer it is for everybody. So with a little bit of my background in some traffic control, when I was towing, we had noticed some benefits as we set up our work zones for our long-term operations for crashes that we worked, and motorist behavior significantly improved when we started making our work zone or our crashes look like work zones. We reduced our lighting and took a lot of the awe factor out of there for folks, and the number of phones going up and taking videos and things like that seemed to decrease, and we noticed a significantly better behavior through our work zones. The goals of this program really align with the TIM goals in general, responder safety, motorist safety, and keeping traffic effectively moving across our state. This program was developed. It was a partnership between NDOT, district staff that was behind the effort to get quality traffic control out there, and then the Towing Association. We worked very closely with them to make sure we produced a program that made sense for them. The goal was, to reduce those false performance measures, reduce those clearance and those clearance times, and reduce the number of secondary crashes. So part of the program, it was developed as an in-person training, and with that, we produced a guidebook that we'll talk a little bit about here later on to really narrow down and provide concise information for towers to have really what was applicable to them. So some of the feedback we'll talk about a little later, but it was pared down where everything in there was truly what was relevant. Now, while traffic control technicians need to know how high to mount signs on a permanent post, it's really not relevant to the towers. So the program was put together as kind of a combination between the traffic control technician and supervisor level courses, and then reduced to only what applied to those shorter duration closures. Matt's going to talk a little bit about NDOT's development of the program as well.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. So questions asked, why would the DOT partner with the tow operators and towing association on a program like this? And for us, it's a couple reasons. The first one, when this was presented to us, we had just recently, a year or two before, completed the development of a basic and advanced temporary traffic control course for ourselves and for our contractors. So the timing was ideal. We had done a lot of the background work. There wasn't a lot of work that needed to go into this training. Like Tony said, we just took what we had and made it a lot more simple for things that tow operators either may encounter or might be responsible for out there. Like Tony said, you know, incident management has been a priority for us, obviously ramped up in the 2014 range when we had some formalized groups. You know, we had some incident management groups before that largely were centered around some larger construction projects. You know, we have a good relationship with our state patrol. You know, a lot of those first responders are invited to project meetings, and so we discuss this stuff then as it centers around construction projects, but hadn't really gone to a formalized program like we have now. So, you know, everything had kind of just, momentum was building in this program. We're also showing support for our tow partners. So when we did a lot of our Sharp 2 training for first responders, one thing that we used to entice them to take the training is we provided some device kits for them. They had to have a minimum number of people trained per department, and if they did, we would give them cones and signs and vests. You know, the things that we discussed in these trainings to help them along their way. But tow operators, being a private entity, were always kind of left out of this, and we felt that, hey, this is a really good idea, something that we can give, you know, maybe give back to them a little bit. And then, as everybody knows, quality traffic control is critical for the reason that Tony states. But also, you know, a lot of times tow operators are out there because somebody's broke down on the side of the road, or they need to tow a vehicle out of the ditch, and they may be out there by themselves. They may not have law enforcement out there. It may not be, they may not have fire or anybody else there with them. So giving them the tools to help make their work safer. We felt all those things were important to this program.
Thanks, Matt. Like Matt mentioned there, we, you know, knowing that quality traffic control improves traffic. Some of the other benefits, and I guess I kind of mentioned it earlier, when traffic control is in place, we no longer need to have the back of queue protection and things, as long as the queue's within our sign sets. And with that, DOT staff and law enforcement can go back into service, and we know how critical that is. That everybody's got other jobs to do when those incidents occur. It takes law enforcement away from enforcement and you know, the other answering calls for service and all the other tasks they have to do, and likewise our DOT resources get stretched sitting out doing traffic control. I've included a couple pictures of the guidebook, and I see there's a question on there about sharing the guidebook. I'll get with the DOT, Cynthia, and get back with you on sharing the guidebook. The guidebook, if any of you are in traffic control, worked in traffic control, there's some of these similar small plan books that give you some tables and some standard layouts and things like that. And we put that together really in applicable situations for towers, and so they had an easy way to reference the stuff they needed, and of course connecting them with their resources at the DOT. This program, it was very clear in the beginning that that this was not going to be a standalone program for towers to just go out as they needed to and close lanes. The entire goal of this, along with Tim, is collaboration between all of our responder disciplines, and there's a chain of work zone approval and methods to get additional resources, make sure DMS boards are lit up, and we're doing all the things that we need to do to properly manage work zones These are being treated as any other work zone / construction project out there. So the trainings were rolled out in October and November of last year. You can see we had a total of 20 tow operators trained representing 13 companies, and I think when I told Paul that earlier, he thought that was a small number, but that is a very significant chunk of our heavy towers across the state of Nebraska. We are pretty spread out here. So there's some folks getting ready to ramp up the program and get started. There's a couple other towing operations that are already into providing their own traffic control for their crashes. We shared this information with our other TIM groups. As you may expect, there's a lot of questions to be had. This slide's actually from one of our outreach to our responders, just to give them an idea what they expect, and there's some takeaway things there from our towers that attended the training. One of the things we hope to reduce queuing and continue that communication between tow operators, and one of the things that was noticeable to me when I was on the road was that speeds actually picked up through our work zones, and while that's a little counterintuitive, when those speeds are maintaining safe speeds through work zones, our queuing is significantly reduced and reduces that risk of secondary crashes. So with that, I just wanted to wrap up with this point that everyone's continuing to do the TIM training, and it's critical to have that background knowledge in TIM. But what I ask of you is to continue to think of innovative new ways. Our towers are still being struck and killed in significant numbers. This is Dale Jones. He was killed January 4th last year in Watertown, South Dakota, and you can see there his friends had a stretch of roadway dedicated to him, and I've shared Dale's story a lot through my TIM trainings. And the point of that is just continue to shift your thinking into new innovative ways to protect not only our towers but the rest of our responders and our motorists as well. So I think there was some questions. Is the towing program only in Nebraska? And then I think there will be questions at the end. Currently, yes. This program is for NDOT towers or Nebraska towers. So I'm going to include my contact information here for Matt and myself if you guys have questions beyond, and we'll try and answer some of these. I told Paul I'd wrap up in 15, so I'll get off of here, Paul. But with that, I appreciate the time, and I'll turn it back over to Paul.
Thank you, Tony and Matt. Appreciate the information. It's a unique program. I do like I like your presentation, and in particular Tony's recommendation to keep thinking outside the box, and what innovative ways can we do it. Innovative ways doesn't mean we need to have this fancy technology or anything like that. It can be just common sense, as this program is. And there are a few questions in there, Tony, if you could. If there's some that can be responded to quickly, and Angela Barnett has a few questions as usual, and that's good. And Angela's very active with us nationally, so I know she knows a lot of people here, but she's got some good questions. So we can save it to the end, or if you want, Tony, we can you can just hit it in the chat part if it's simple enough. So with that, we'll move on to our next speaker, who is Captain John Stevenson from Grand Prairie Fire Department, and about when we're talking about thinking outside the box a little bit and being creative, we all know that getting those fire trucks whacked as a routine can be a very, very expensive proposition for those fire departments who are all working with limited budget. So with that, Captain, if you take it from here and explain up the program that you guys developed.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, I'm going to apologize up front, everyone. I'm not as polished a speaker as these other gentlemen are, and we don't really work on a national level. We're just a local little community here that had an idea. So Grand Prairie is somewhat unique, at least within our region, our area. We sit smack dab between Dallas and Fort Worth, two of the biggest cities up here in North Texas. But we have 2 interstates, 6 state highways, 1 turnpike, and we're spread over 4 counties. Now, most of the other cities up here, they're located within 1 county, but we're located within 4. And so that poses a little bit of an issue for us. We are split right in half between Dallas and Tarrant County, so that means that we have 2 TxDOT offices that serve us, and that can cause for a lot of confusion down here. Now, I'm not disparaging anybody in any way, but when you have to deal with 2 entities like that, they don't really talk. There's no cohesion. There's some will do it this way, some will do it that way. So we spend a lot of time out on the highway trying to figure out who's going to come help us on the highway sometimes. That's getting fixed. That's getting taken care of. There's a lot of crosstalk and a lot of work that's going into that. But that caused for us to try to have a need to take some measures of our own. So we've had several vehicles struck. I think everybody in this group on this webinar here is familiar with fire trucks and towers like Matt and Tony talked about being struck, and PD being struck out on the highway. And about a year ago, my fire chief came to me. I'm the special operations coordinator for the fire department. So mostly I deal with hazmat and swift water and dive and rescue and all. I had no idea about traffic incident management other than the online program that we all did. So I had to learn up quick. Like I said, my fire chief, Robert Fite, came to me and he said, look, we got to do something about this. We had just had a tower struck on I-20 and unfortunately was a fatality, and he was removing an abandoned vehicle. When I got into this, I found out that just how dangerous those abandoned vehicles were on the highway and just how dangerous it was for those towers. And as a career firefighter, you know, it's nothing for me to go into a burning building, but standing out on the side of that road is the scariest thing that we do. And having my crews out there and having to watch out for them in the middle of the night on the highway, that was always the scariest thing for me. So he tasked me with putting together a blocker project. I had no clue what I was going to do with it, but I figured that the guys that were out there doing the work and doing those projects on the highway, those would be the ones that I needed to go to and talk to figure out how to do this. So as you can see there, those are 2 of our blockers that we came up with. I said, well, if we can take these fire trucks and we're going to stick them out there in the middle of the road, we got a couple things going on. One, it's a fire truck, so it's built to go save people's lives. And 2, it's built to help protect us as responders. So what can we do to make this as safe as possible? And when I was doing the research on these, I found that there was a common theme, that there was a common thread that run through all of these, is that the drivers of these vehicles were dying, the ones that were striking the vehicle. And it occurred to me, okay, we're protecting the responders, but what are we doing for the public? Because we still have a responsibility to protect the public out there, whether they're texting and they're a distracted driver or they're driving under the influence. Regardless, we still need to protect them. So in all of these news accounts and the information that we could find, we need to figure out a way that we could also protect the public. And so then we started looking. And I dug a little deeper into these TMAs. And you'll see that on the back of our truck there, when I go back a slide, you'll see that those are traffic devices. And I'm not plugging one particular company or the other. I'm not endorsing any. I'm just speaking about my experience with putting this together. So fire trucks have to park a certain way on the highway. You've all seen it, kind of at a lateral angle to impact. So I had to find a TMA that could take a lateral impact at highway speeds that could be mounted on a fire truck. And it just so happened that the traffic devices with the MASH technology were the only ones that met that standard that we wanted or that we needed. Now, we've had several fire trucks that have been struck. As a matter of fact, just here in the beginning of February, when we had our ice and snowstorm, we had not put our blockers into service yet. So this is a fairly new program for us. As a matter of fact, we even promoted through civil service to have drivers assigned to these apparatus 24 hours a day, 7 days a week as a permanent position. That's a big deal for a fire department to do that. This is an ordinance issue that goes through civil service. So we're actually promoting for a permanent position for people to drive these blocking apparatus. Now, these blocking apparatus are outfitted with different things. For one, we built in a coffin up top that holds 9 cubic feet of absorbent, because you get on some of these accidents like Matt and Tony were talking about with some of these semis, and they're just destroyed on the highway, and there's a lot of fuel and fluids, and you need a lot of absorbent. So we did a lot. We did some other upgrades to them. But so promoting to a position like that's a very big deal for a city. That's a large commitment for a city, and we're very happy that we have a mayor and a city council and city manager that are that forward thinking to pull the trigger on something like this. So anyway, we put the TMAs on the back. Now, we did not do this by ourselves. There's a gentleman named Travis McCain, and he owns Gulf Highway Equipment. And without his expertise and his knowledge in this, we couldn't have pulled this off. I had probably talked to about 6 or 7 different manufacturers, vendors, representatives, companies that outfit vehicles, and all of them said the same thing. You can't do it. You can't put it on a fire truck. You just can't do it. They're not built the same. And when I talked to Travis, he said, you know what? Let me take a look, and let's try to figure this out. And he did. So now with our trucks there, the driver never needs to leave his seat. So he's never exposed to the traffic. He can operate all of the controls from inside. And you'll see that there's an arrow board on there. So some of the other fire trucks that departments were parking out in the roadway have really, really bright LEDs, but they don't have anything that gets up in the air for the upstream traffic there. So people can't really see it. You come over a rise or a dip, and you come up on this accident, and now all of a sudden there's a fire truck parked in your way. And that was another thing that we took into consideration is when you put that out there, now you're taking this vehicle that's made for life safety, and you're sticking it in the middle of the road for it to essentially be hit. Once it's hit, once it's struck, you lose that vehicle. There's very few of them that can be struck multiple times and stay in service. So that was another reason that we did this and why we put these TMAs on there, is the reuse of it. Now I can go through the slides, and like I said, most of everybody in here is familiar with this information. So ours was two-pronged. It was to build a barrier for the emergency responders and to provide a protective barrier which reduces the risk of injury to death to the motorists on the public highways. And I don't need to read these slides to you or go through the percentages and stuff like that. You guys are pretty familiar with that. One of the other things that we wanted to do, though, is we wanted to participate with PD and our towers. So having that gentleman that died on the highway trying to remove an abandoned vehicle, that really affected us. So one of the things that we're doing here is we're writing in our SOPs that for those abandoned vehicles, our towing agencies can contact us, and we can respond out and help them remove that vehicle. We can block for them. Or if PD is on an extended scene or a stranded motorist, we can go out and block for them as well. And both of those agencies, this program has been well received by both of those and supported by both of them. So here's some of the things that we had to look at. The Traffic Scorpion TMAs are tested and approved for lateral impacts. MASH certified. This total project cost $65,000. That's for retrofitting the fire trucks, the TMAs, the arrow boards, the arrow board up top and on each side of the vehicle. Now, one of the other things that we did, and Tony and Matt touched on this a little bit, is we know when we're we've got enough experience from sitting on the side of the highway of what our lights and our fire trucks do to oncoming vehicles. And for some reason, the fire department's a little behind the times on this across the board. We like the bright, flashy lights and everything else. We've gotten to the point now with LEDs that they're blinding. Even when we ride in our fire trucks and we're behind an ambulance that we're dispatched on a medical call, the LEDs on these apparatus are absolutely blinding now. And so if we can't see, we know that those drivers can't see. And, you know, we drive up and down the roadways and we come across crashes where other fire departments are working as well.
And we found that it was just blinding. So what we did is we muted those lights on those blockers. Now, the first time that we put these blockers into service was back in the early part of February when we had our ice and snowstorm. So that first day, we had 4 fire trucks struck by motorists out on the highway that very first day. When our 4th one got struck, my chief called me and said, can we put the blockers in service? Are they ready to go? And I said, yes, sir. And so we went and got the blockers and we put them in service. And after they were set up and in service and running for these wrecks, we didn't have another apparatus struck. Nor did we have the blockers struck. And I think that plays a lot into having those arrow boards up in the air, the early warning, downstream warning, the muted lights so they're easy to see, plus it didn't create that big distraction from that big scene, treating it more like a work zone like Matt and Tony were talking about. So those were some of the things that we were thinking about. And then we thought, okay, now what do we do if it does get struck? How do we replace this? Well, part of my job with the hazardous materials in the fire department is we bill for our responses under hazardous materials. We're a FEMA Type 1 hazardous materials team, and with that we have a billing and fee schedule that we use for those responses. So speaking to the insurance companies out there, we can come back and at the price point that the TMAs are, and for the replacement of the labor, repair costs and everything, we can bill that back to the insurance companies and replace those. And within 4 hours, we can have a new TMA put on the back of that truck and that truck put back in service. So that was another reason that we really decided on this brand, this type, is the way that they are mounted to the fire trucks. But again, that was only because of Travis McCain and Gulf Highway. So this is a photo of one of those icy days out there on Robinson Road. And you see that by putting it out there like that, it doesn't really create a big distraction. Now, this one had been on scene for quite a while, but you can see that it doesn't create that big draw of people there. And this was a major accident. Also, one of the things is that this didn't tie up. Now, when we put these blockers out here, we don't tie up that $2 million ladder truck or that $1.1 million fire truck with those 4 crew members or those 5 crew members. They're not tied up sitting out on the highway for hours. They can go make those medical calls. They can go make the strokes, the heart attacks, the other car wrecks, and respond for other calls for service in the community. Otherwise, you lose that apparatus. And there's only so many resources in the fire department that we have to respond, and they run thin very quickly. So I know I kind of got through this very quick, and like I said, I apologize up front. I'm not as polished a speaker as these gentlemen on here with me, but I'm just proud to be able to share our project and what we've been able to do with that. So thank you.
Captain, don't be ridiculous. You spoke very polished, and none of us are polished. None of us are experienced, because I do it a lot, but I'm certainly not polished, and neither are any of the other folks you heard on the phone today. So you certainly did a great job, and kudos to you again for creative thinking. And boy, I tell you, $65,000. Was that for both vehicles or just for one vehicle? $65,000.
That $65,000 took care of both vehicles, mounting, retrofitting, everything complete. Which Travis had to build control boxes and do some other stuff. Everything complete, $65,900 for both of those vehicles. And now that he has that down, it won't cost as much next time around. So. This was just a trial. This was a, hey, let's pull this in the garage and try to work on this over the weekend kind of thing. So he's more polished now, and as a matter of fact, he has 6 fire trucks sitting in his shop right now that are getting done. Since people just driving by on the highway where his shop is, just driving by saw our trucks out there and would stop. And literally today he has 6 apparatus over there that he's retrofitting around here. And I know that I've been in contact with at least 4 or 5 other departments in the Metroplex that want to do the same thing. So can I answer one question, please? There's a Joe Tebow in the chat room, and he asked about the tank on the engines being removed to accommodate absorbent. No, we did not remove the water tanks. And as a matter of fact, what we did is we kept 125 feet of hose on the bumper line of the fire truck, and the water tanks still have water in them. So we can use those as a portable hydrant on the highway if we need to, or if this blocker happens to roll up and it's the first unit on scene and you have a vehicle fire, maybe an entrapment or something, they can begin firefighting on it. So they can get water on there. What we did is we pulled off the deck gun mounting up top, and Travis built a steel coffin to hold 9 cubic feet. And then we have gravity feed chutes on the side that are just made out of PVC that with a feed chute on them. And you just open and close, and you can fill a 5-gallon bucket from either side so you're not exposed to the traffic.
Well, that's great. Thanks for answering that. Joe Tebow is our teammate here at Federal Highway, so but he's 40 years retired, not retired, 40 years volunteer firefighter, so he knows this stuff.
Wow.
He has a fire truck in his driveway, so he's not all there sometimes, I think. But,
Great.
But no, Captain, thanks very much. We have to move on to our next speaker.
Yes, sir.
And your great presentation. You're very polished, and we hope to have you again. But certainly 65,000, 35,000 something or other per fire truck. Come on, folks, that's a small price to pay. Our next speaker is an old friend of mine from Mass Highway. A lot of you know that I'm from Massachusetts. I'm in Massachusetts right now, but Neil is, we worked together for a long time, and tremendous respect. He's another guy that literally has worked his way up through the ranks to I don't know, some fancy title. I don't know, Assistant Administrator for Traffic Safety and Safety. So again, he's a very busy man. There's a lot of people working for him, but he took the time to, per my request, to explain a little bit about the TIM program in Massachusetts, but about in particular interest was when I heard about some cool legislation he got passed. So with that, Neil, if you don't mind taking it from here, brother.
All right, all set. Thanks, Paul. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Neil Bedrow, as Paul mentioned, and I am the Assistant Administrator in Traffic Safety. It just means that I deal with all things traffic and safety. Today, I want to just give you a little synopsis about our TIMS program in Massachusetts. Obviously, the focus will be on the legislation that we just got passed, but I figured it would be good to kind of paint the picture. So, an overview of our presentation, I'll just focus on our goal of our program in Mass, kind of how we continually update our URM, and we develop the field book and a quick reference guide to kind of help our first responders. Highlight some of the resources that we've provided over the years to our Highway Division first responders, and the partnership we have with our state police. I'll cover a little bit update on our TIM training program and how we continue to evolve things. And then, of course, at the end, I will definitely focus on the quick clearance measures that we have in place and what that new legislation means for us. Sorry, I was having trouble with my slide. The goal for our program is basically the same lines of what probably everyone else that's on the call today and all the other states. Quick clearance and working towards a rapid response. And we obviously follow a defined incident command structure, and this is well documented in our URM. And the key is to keep the communication spigot open and flowing with information. We try to do this to make sure that we're providing timely and accurate information back to our agencies as well as to the public. We all cross-train our first responders so that it helps to foster collaboration and coordination out in the field. And it goes to say, without safety is paramount and essential, for the scene to be successful out there. One of the things that we've focused on in the past dozen or so years is the need to keep our URM up to date and relative to the change in means and methods of how we do our business. We've most recently updated our URM in 2019, and it was through the efforts of our TIM task force. And Paul doesn't give himself enough credit, but which really took off under his leadership. It was just a few years ago, we'll say. But the last two editions, the 2014 and 2019, what we did is instead of handing someone a giant book, we created a field guide. It basically is all the key essential points that people need. In this latest edition, we color-coded tabs to make it real easy for the different disciplines to find their section, understand their roles and responsibilities. We've incorporated the typical drawings for how to best set up the incident scene so everyone knows how things should flow. And at the end, you have the key contact information, not necessarily the names, but how to get in touch with the Environmental Protection Agency or the medical examiner's office and so forth. This is a picture of a quick reference guide that we issue this as part of our TIM training. This kind of just is a quick one-pager, easy for folks to look at to kind of show how we'd like the incident scenes to be set up. One difference in this 2019 version versus what we had previously is we moved the police cruiser out of the travel lane. We've been really focusing on trying to get the cruiser to stay off the shoulder. Otherwise, as we just mentioned in the captain's presentation about the fire truck being that line of defense protecting the scene, well, we found that the cruiser's been that. It's been the crash truck, and we're trying to get them to stay out of the travel lane and where it's safe for them. Some of the things that we've done for our first responders, obviously we adopted the typical applications that are part of the MUTCD Part 6I. I know some of my colleagues from the National Committee are on the call today. In Mass, we had, because of my affiliation with the National Committee, we had access to the drawings before they made it into the 2009 manual, and we adopted them early on. So before they were even officially endorsed by Federal Highway, we had them in our work zone safety book. We also issued a Traffic Incident Management Engineering Directive. This is just a quick way of saying it's like an SOP or an order that we want to use the emergency scenes, with the pink coral color. We have so much construction going on in Massachusetts. It's like a perpetual state of construction, I would say. And I really wanted to try to drive home the difference between an incident scene and construction, because I think some of our motorists kind of tune out the construction because there's so many of the orange and black signs. So we want to use these signs to kind of highlight that this is different. Some of the other things that we've done is we worked with a national manufacturer, a couple of different iterations, but we finally pulled together what we consider a portable incident privacy screen kit. We provided these to our districts so they have a number of kits available to prevent that rubbernecking and to shield the victim from the prying eyes of folks driving by. And this has been very well received. And then finally, in recent years, we've added sequential road flares. Essentially, what these are used when the first responders get on the scene before they have time to even get a full lane closure type setup. Obviously, they're during the dusk, dawn, and the overnight periods are most effective. But they're easy to deploy, and we found that they've been very successful out in the field. So these are things that we make sure that all of our first responders in the Highway Division have readily available. Also, we work very closely with the state police, and over the years, part of my safety group is we've always provided funding wherever we can to assist with the collision analysis and reconstruction unit. Whenever there's a bad crash, we can clear the scene, but at the end of the day, we still need to figure out what went wrong, and it documents a lot of that stuff for the legal liability issues. So we bought a photogrammetry system, and that was like the first of its kind, which quickly over the years became obsolete, and then we started working with Leica GPS rovers. And it's not like a traditional survey scene, but it still took time to get out there and capture the points for reconstructing that crash. We've since now gone to the use of drones with some very high-tech software that makes the capture of this critical data much faster, the lower risk. We don't have to have more folks out on the roadway, and we can get the roadway open to the traffic and the public much quicker. In terms of our first responder training, this is probably one of the things that we're proud of, that we've been very, very aggressive with, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention again how Paul was very instrumental in getting this kicked off the ground. I don't want to say how many years ago that was, but I saw the stats that were on the screen earlier in the presentation, and we're now actually up to 8,304 individuals, multiple disciplines, and this is over 80%, actually 82.5% of our goal. And that goal is something that we actually revised in 2018 because it reflects a much larger responder population, where we've especially added in additional EMS and the tow industry into that. And then most recently, that goal doesn't even include another recent change, that our state police now require all tow recovery operators to be trained before they're allowed to bid on a contract with the state police. We have 153 trainers that have gone through, and we just had a train-the-trainer virtual session this past February. And our training does, which probably most states do, is provide the 4 hours of OEMS credit. And we've received the approval this past year to do virtual training so we can continue to roll along with our successful program. And the last thing I'd like to mention is that something we've done to try to capture more folks is we incorporated TIM into our work zone safety training that we're providing to local agencies as well as the state and local police academies. So they're getting a little, there's a lot of overlap between the two. This way here we're teaching both modules to these academies. So here's a breakdown of the numbers. All the different disciplines. I'm not going to read the numbers, you can look on the screen, but it's definitely a diverse group. And one of the things that we've done in our training program, from what the traditional, course that we got from, suggestions through Federal Highway, was we teach a collector and local road response techniques in addition to the traditional freeway. We want to make sure that whether it's an incident out on the highway or out on the secondary roads, that they understand the differences and how they address things. We've also been focusing on our environmental response folks to ensure that they know what we do, why we do it, and we've been seeing much better collaboration with them as part of this. And then finally, the medical examiner's office was a key for us to get on board and start to be regular participants, not only in the training efforts, but in our TIM task force, so that they understand the need for the rapid response and to help get the roadway back open, which hasn't always been the case. All right, now let's talk about the legislative measures. One of the key things to address the safety of the men and women on the roadway and clearing incidents was to keep that roadway open and moving, was getting certain pieces of this legislation passed. And we've been going at this for a number of years. I don't know how long we started on trying to get the move over law passed, but finally it was implemented in 2009, and thankfully we were able to ensure that they include not only the police, fire, and EMS, but also the towing and recovery operators as well as maintenance workers. We still do need, and we're trying to get changes to legislation to encourage to incorporate utility, which is an essential part of trying to protect them out there as well. The one downside, and this is again something we're hoping to modify and get taken care of, is that it's only a fine of up to $100, which is not much of a deterrent to get people to pay attention. And then it's part of a Federal Highway Traffic Incident Management Assessment that was back in the late 2000s. A deficiency was identified, the laws that we had in place at the time. We had nothing on the books to address the vehicle removal or authority removal, or what's called the hold harmless statutes. So here's a look at the timeline of how long it took to get those two essential pieces. So we were able to get move over law, and then we had to try to focus. So following up on the assessment that we had, we held what was called the Massachusetts Mobility Summit. It was actually run by Federal Highway, and one of the focus areas was incident management. This gave, I know Paul was there, myself, and it gave us a voice with a larger audience to try to raise the need, and we were able to kind of work this into to show others that we'd be much faster at clearing incidents if we had these couple of pieces of legislation. We got the support as part of the report. However, despite all the attention, it never seemed to get the traction that it needed to advance. So it kind of stymied, and then over the years, it takes us to 2016 when we had an increased focus on congestion and some of the impacts that the large incidents were having out on our roadways, related to the backups and the queuing and secondary crashes. So again, I was able to kind of push, look, well, there's a couple of pieces of legislation that would really help straighten this out, give us the ability to get the road open quicker and whatnot. We finally were able to get our general counsel's office to work with us to draft language for both the driver removal and authority removal laws. We basically read all the different statutes that were in place around the country, and then we kind of picked the best of the best and moved that forward. However, once again, that fluttered a bit, and it wasn't until more recently where our congestion in Massachusetts got to the point that our governor demanded that we do a congestion study, and I took that as an opportunity to basically point out to our Secretary of Transportation, one of the key things we need is we need help. We need this legislation. We need to give our first responders the tools in the toolbox to be able to do their jobs better and safer and open the road quicker. So we got it into our transportation bond bill. That took forever as well. But it finally passed very late in the night this past January with the language that we had proposed intact, which was tremendous success in my eyes. So now that we have the driver removal law, it's like many other states, the focus is to get motorists to move their vehicles involved in minor crashes out of the travelway into a safe area to exchange papers or wait for law enforcement to show up. Gone are the days that they just stop in the middle of the travel lane and wait for someone to show up to help them. This is a key measure for us to try to not only keep those folks that are involved in the crash, their passengers, safe, but also to prevent the secondary crashes, which is probably more problematic in terms of delays and backups. The language on the law is on the screen here. It's pretty straightforward. Excuse me. The authority removal law, or the hold harmless law, is essentially focused on support for our towing and recovery operators who are not otherwise covered under the state's limited liability law. It's one thing for police and fire who only had a cap on the liability, but the individuals that are moving the big rigs or the vehicles or what are out of the harm's way were not protected, and in some cases we had to wait for permission to for moving these vehicles, and it just would prolong the time that they're out on the roadway and put people in risk. So the law states that under the direction of the designated agency overseeing the roadway incident, so incident command, the tow operator is directed to remove a vehicle cargo from the roadway. They will not be held liable for any damage sustained to that vehicle cargo as it's being removed. Oops, I apologize for that. Both clauses include a fine of not more than $100. Again, not as much as we would have liked, and it's not a surchargeable offense on the driving record, but at least we have the law in our books, which is something that we're happy. We'll take baby steps. So what are the next steps for this? The first is to get our multi-agency task force together to kind of develop and fine-tune a public outreach plan of attack to kind of advertise these new laws, make sure the appropriate audiences are aware of them. On the driver removal law, we want to decide on a catchy slogan or a logo, which a lot of states have: steer it, clear it, and they have designated areas for exchanging papers. So we got to kind of nail that down and get something so this can become mainstream. We're going to use the Registry of Motor Vehicles to put flyers into the public about this new law, what it means, what they should be doing. Every time someone gets a license or a registration renewal in the mail, it's just an extra sheet of paper in there. Hopefully it will capture their attention. We're also going to develop PSA messaging. We have lots and lots of large digital billboards on the side of the road that we get PSA time, so we'll get some creative PSAs. We'll also reach out to the local AAA office, and then we have our registry monitors, so you can advertise and put these information on in those areas to try to get the word out. And then finally, we have to update our TIM training to make sure that we're including the benefits of the authority removal law and spell out what it means for the new attendees, and also get the message out to those we've already trained. With that, that's just kind of a quick overview of our TIMS program, the new laws, and hopefully it's going to help us make a difference to get our roads open quicker and keep people safe out of the roadway. That's all. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Neil. Great presentation. Of course, I'm very proud of the Massachusetts program and all the progress we've made. I'm just saying 80% trained, everybody. How come Massachusetts is leading the pack with 80% trained? So, hey, just saying, we all know that everyone from Massachusetts is awesome. So, I'm just calling everybody out there, see if you guys can compete. Couple of things, though. The authority removal laws that cover towing is a big deal, right? So kudos to Neil and your staff for putting that together. That's a big deal for everybody. We hear that from towing all the time on the issues and the concerns they have when they're moving stuff to when people can come back after them. So and then of course the driver removal. I remember trying to get that when 20 years ago, we were trying to get that thing passed. We struggled and struggled and struggled. So kudos again, Neil, for hanging in there and getting that thing. It was always frustrating to me because driver removal for those states that don't have it or that don't market it and advertise it is low-hanging fruit, right? What are people doing out in the high speed? I saw one on TV today that they were in the middle lane and motorists were walking around, in a daze. And I used to see that when I was back in Massachusetts at the TMC, and it would drive me crazy because they could just pull off to the side of the road. Not only is it better for congestion, but it's so dangerous. So. Really proud of, and the whole strategy of putting it into the transportation bond bill. That's something everyone should consider in pushing your legislation or any changes to the legislation, and and then don't forget about the marketing. I'm glad you guys, Neil, have talked about the marketing that needs to go along with this, because that's so very important. When we were doing some workshops around the country, the state had the driver removal law, but folks didn't even know about it. Some of the police officers in the workshop didn't know about it. So that's just great, and I'm very proud Massachusetts is kicking butt with TIM. So, Ed Ginakakis is the TIM program manager. He does a lot of this work, and want to give him a shout out as well. So, with that, Neil, thanks very much. Appreciate it. So,
hey, Paul.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is Jim. I got a question for Neil. If I heard him correctly, he mentioned something about towers now being mandated to take the training, and I was curious. Where did that mandate come from?
Yep, absolutely. So
for any of the state highways with the state police, anytime they call for a tow truck, they're all under contract. So what the state police did is they just put that as a mandate in the contract that they have to be trained in order to bid on to get that work. Now, the good thing is that it wasn't a big impact because most of the folks that are getting those contracts are already very, very involved with our TIM task force. The Towing Association is well represented in a key part. They wrote letters of support for this legislation we just got passed. So it's been a good mutual partnership. But what it did is there were some slackers or some towing authorities, the groups that weren't maybe participating, but this gave them a little nudge to ensure that they were TIM trained. Okay, thanks, Neil. It's a best practice, but we haven't got, well, I think with you it would be like 7 states that now have some type of mandate, whether it's through the towing contract, like you said, for rotation, or just a letter signed by the state police highway patrol colonel mandating that the towers have to have the training. And they usually give them a grace period. So just a shout out about that, because everyone else on this phone call, Paul, myself, and Joe, our team's been asking states or suggesting to states to follow suit, because it's just something that, you know, it's an easy way, I guess, to get the towers trained. So yeah, we know, right, that the towers get hit at a higher rate than the rest of us, so they can use the training for their own safety, and we know they get killed at a higher rate. Although I haven't seen too much this year, right, Jim? But traditionally, they've been the highest impacted by the struck bys, right? Yeah.
And Angela types in that Utah just did the same thing. The state patrol mandated the training for towers. So, and Texas does have something, you know, has something in place for towing Lindsay. So I would reach out to David McDonald, Millie Hayes. David McDonald is from the state DOT, and Millie Hayes is from Federal Highway, and they can point you in the right direction. We're running out of time here. Neil, there was a question in there about any chance of getting that manual in a PDF so you can share with, I don't know, someone can email Neil or send an email to me, and we can get you that, Neil. You don't mind sharing that? Is that
no,
right, Neil?
Absolutely. What I'll do is I'll send you the file, and then you can distribute it maybe to, I don't know if you have a mailing list with these folks, or?
Yeah, we could share. Sure. Share it with some folks, at least go back to the people that asked for it and anyone else that asked for it. So,
okay.
So, you know, this was, we're got to wrap it up here. Thank you, Neil. Thank you to all the speakers. Everyone was excellent today. You know, we Jim and I and Joe are so fortunate that we always get such good speakers and presentations, and it's really rewarding for us to see that we can help facilitate these conversations, these discussions. And what great comments in the chat pod. Some of you responded to Jim's request. We're going to get these comments. We print them out, and we'll be reviewing them again. But great chats. I'm really thrilled. I think that's my favorite part of this, is everyone chiming in and doing what they're doing. And yeah, keep it up. And we're at 2:59, so I'm sorry if we missed some questions. There was so much activity today. I'm not sure I kept up with it as well as I could, as well as sometimes I can, but I'd rather have the chat. So with any pending questions, any serious questions you need, just give us a holler, and we can. And we'll get those questions answered one way or the other. So with that, we will. Jim, is there anything else that you wanted to say today?
No, Paul. Just ditto all your remarks. Everyone stay safe.
Yep. So thanks, everybody. And as Jim says, stay safe in more ways than one around these days. So take care, everybody. See you next month. Don't forget,